A teenage girl walking to her own pyre. 700 fishing boats sailing into a war. A submarine on the floor of the Atlantic with 33 men breathing the last of the air. A volcanologist on a ridge with 2 minutes left to live, screaming into a radio. May has carried more acts of courage than any month should. 6 stories. Almost 6 centuries between the first and the last. Every one of them happened on a day that's about to come around again. You're inside the May edition of our Brave series. The moments where ordinary people had every reason to back down and didn't. 6 events. 549 years between the first one and the last one. We're going through them in order: oldest first, modern last. The line that connects them might surprise you. Smoke and wet hay. Stone walls. A wooden platform built so the crowd in the back could see. The marketplace in Rouen is packed. Thousands of people, by the chroniclers, and at the center stand a 19-year-old in a white shirt, her hands tied. Her name is Joan. 3 months earlier, a church tribunal told her she could keep her life if she signed a document admitting her visions of saints had been lies. She signed. Days later, she took it back, knowing exactly what taking it back would mean. The verdict was read out in Latin and in French. She listened. She did not flinch. As they walked her to the stake, she asked a friar to hold up a wooden cross so she could see it through the smoke. He did. The fire was lit at noon. Witnesses said she called out the names of saints, Catherine, Margaret, Michael, until her voice was gone. Her ashes were thrown into the Seine that same afternoon to keep relics from being collected. She was 19 years old. 25 years later, in 1456, the same church that condemned her reopened her trial and overturned every charge. 5 centuries after that, in 1920, she was made a saint. The marketplace where she died is still there. People leave flowers on May the 30th every year without fail. The youngest person on this list, and somehow the one whose moment landed hardest. But she was not the only person on a May day who knew exactly what their next minute was about to cost them. Cold. The cabin of a Lockheed Vega is cramped, unheated, and at 15,000 feet over the North Atlantic in late May, the air outside drops well below zero. Amelia Earhart has been in the air for 1 hour. Her altimeter, the only instrument that tells her how high she is over the ocean she cannot see in the dark, has just failed. She has 13 more hours to fly. The exhaust manifold cracks an hour after that. Flames start licking out of the engine cowling, visible to her through the side window. She makes the calculation pilots make: turn back to Newfoundland and live, or keep going and possibly die. She keeps going. Then ice starts forming on the wings. The plane drops 3,000 feet in an uncontrolled spin before she pulls it out, low enough now to see the white caps. She climbs back up. A fuel leak opens in the cabin. She can smell it. She knows what one spark would do. She files this away and keeps flying. 14 hours and 56 minutes after takeoff, the green coast of Northern Ireland appears in front of her. She picks a pasture in Culmore, north of Derry, and lands. The first person she sees is a farmhand. He asks her if she has come far. She is the second person ever to fly the Atlantic alone, and the only woman who has ever done it. Most articles call her a pioneer. They mean a record setter. They forget that for 14 hours in the dark, with the smell of fuel in her cockpit, she had to choose to keep flying every single minute. And she was not the last person on this list to make that choice in the dark. Cold green water. The USS Squalus is on a routine test dive off the coast of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The descent starts normally. At 40 feet down, somewhere between the engine room and the control compartment, the main induction valve fails, a steel sleeve 4 feet across that is supposed to seal shut as the boat goes under. Salt water starts pouring into the aft compartments at a rate measured in tons per minute. The crew gets watertight doors closed in time to save 33 men in the forward half of the boat. The other 26 are in the half that is flooding. They are gone in the dark in seconds. The Escuela settles on the seabed at 240 feet. Above on the surface, a Navy diver named Lieutenant Commander Charles Momsen, Swede to the men who knew him, has spent 10 years of his career fighting the Navy to fund a piece of equipment exactly nobody believed in, the McCann Rescue Chamber. A sealed steel diving bell that could mate with a sunken submarine's escape hatch, take men aboard, and lift them to the surface in batches. Until this morning, it had never been used in a real rescue. Over the next 13 hours, in 4 separate dives into the same freezing Atlantic that had killed 26 of their shipmates, Momsen's chamber brought every one of the 33 trapped men to the surface alive. It is still the only successful rescue of men trapped in a submarine at depth in the history of submarines. Most of the survivors had already written their final letters to their wives. They never had to send them. May was not done with the deep water that decade. 1 year later, almost to the day, hundreds of small boats would head out into a different kind of dark. Sand and burning oil. 340,000 Allied soldiers are pinned against the French coast by the German army, the English Channel at their backs, and the Luftwaffe overhead. The British War Office has done the math. They expect to evacuate 45,000 men. The rest will be killed or captured. On the night of the 25th of May, the Admiralty puts out a call to anyone in southern England with a boat. The boat does not matter. Fishing trawlers, paddle steamers, oyster smacks, racing yachts, lifeboats from cruise ships, river ferries that have never seen open ocean, anything that floats. By dawn on the 26th, hundreds of these boats are crossing the channel. Their owners are at the wheel. None of them have been drafted. None of them are being paid. Most of them have no defensive armament. The Luftwaffe knows what is happening. They strafe the boats and bomb the beaches. The water turns into something the survivors later refuse to describe in interviews. By June the 4th, when the operation ends, the little ships and the Royal Navy together have evacuated 338,226 soldiers. That is more than 7 times what the War Office thought possible. A British civilian named Charles Lightoller, in his 60s, the man who had been the second officer on the Titanic, sailed his own yacht across and brought back 127 men in a boat designed for 21. He made the trip alone. The British called what happened the Dunkirk spirit. The Germans, who had 3 armies pressing into France, called it the miracle that should not have happened. Both sides agreed. The soldiers got out because civilians who had no military reason to die showed up anyway. May had one more chapter of pilots ahead, and this was the most technically impossible thing the Royal Air Force had ever attempted. Moonlight. The Mohn Reservoir in Germany's Ruhr Valley is mirror flat at midnight on the 16th of May. Then the water starts to ripple, not from wind, but from the engines of 19 Lancaster bombers, flying so low that their propellers are kicking spray off the surface. Royal Air Force 617 Squadron has been training in secret for 2 months. Tonight is the only night the operation can fly. The moon is bright enough, the water is high enough, and a British engineer named Barnes Wallis has handed them a weapon that defies physics. The bomb is a 5-ton cylindrical drum that has to be released at exactly 232 miles per hour, 60 feet above the water, 425 yards from a dam wall, while spinning backwards at 500 revolutions per minute. The spin makes it skip across the surface like a stone, hop the torpedo nets, sink against the wall, and detonate at the exact depth that creates a shock wave inside the structure. 60 feet is the height of a 6-story building. The pilots are flying that altitude in the dark, in moonlight, with anti-aircraft guns shooting up at them from both flanks of the lake. 8 of the 19 aircraft are lost. 53 of the 133 aircrew do not return. The Mohn and Eder dams break. Water that comes out of them floods miles of valley downstream. The mission is given a code, name people still use, Operation Chastise. The pilots called it the Bouncing Bomb Raid. Barnes Wallace was given the casualty figures for his cruise the next morning. He is reported never to have spoken about that night without weeping. May had one final chapter, the modern one, about a man who saw the danger first and chose not to leave. A camping trailer on a ridge. Coldwater 2 observation post is 6 miles north of Mount St. Helens, a volcano that has been swelling on its north flank for 2 months. David Johnston is 30 years old. He is a U.S. Geological Survey volcanologist out of Vancouver, Washington. He arrived at Coldwater 2 the evening before to relieve the geologist who was on shift. Johnston did not have to be here. In fact, he is the geologist who, more than anyone else on the survey team, fought to keep the public out of the red zone around the mountain. He told the press in the weeks before that the area around St. Helens was, quote, analogous to standing next to a powder keg with a fuse lit. State officials who wanted to reopen the highway for the summer tourist season called him alarmist. He did not back down. Hundreds of campers and loggers were turned away from the mountain because of him. None of them died. At 8:32 in the morning of May the 18th, a magnitude 5.1 earthquake collapses the entire north flank of St. Helens. The mountain comes apart, a wall of superheated gas, ash, and rock, moving at 300 miles per hour, hundreds of degrees hot, heads directly for Coldwater 2. From the trailer, Johnston has perhaps 2 minutes. He grabs the radio and transmits one of the most quoted sentences in the history of geology. Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it. The blast hits the ridge before he can say anything else. His body was never found. 57 people died on Mount St. Helens that morning. It would have been thousands. He had spent the year before saving them. The radio operator on the other end of his transmission kept the original tape. You can still hear it. He sounds calm. He sounds like a man who already knew. 6 people, 6 different centuries, a 19-year-old at stake, a pilot at 15,000 feet, a diver at 240 feet, a civilian on a fishing boat, a bomber pilot at 60, a geologist on a ridge. None of them woke up planning to be the brave one. Which one hit you the hardest? Drop the year in the comments. Subscribe. Next month we go from brave to scientific, and the stakes do not get any smaller. See you then.